Welcome to the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I'm Deborah Herlax-Enos, a small-town girl turned TV nutritionist and healthy living expert. I design health programs for the average guy or gal, including those average guys named Metallica. On September 1st, 2020, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I asked every oncologist the same question, why did I get cancer? But none of my doctors had good answers for me. I wanted answers, and that's why I started this podcast. I want to help you to lower your cancer risk and provide self-care tips for those in the battle. I'm getting answers, and I want to share them with you. What did I take away from today's episode? I've got 2 tips for you today. So first of all, that 80% of your immune system is in your gut, and Kitty gives us some great tips on how to boost our immune system through some of the foods that we're eating. The other tip is our discussion about how fear can really impact your digestion and the possibility of getting cancer again. Welcome to Why Did I Get Cancer? And I am so excited about today's guest, Kitty Martone. I've been a huge fan for a couple of years now. In fact, I binged all the way from where I live in Seattle down to San Diego last February. I probably listened to just about every episode. And I just said to myself, oh my gosh, if we lived in the same town, we would be buds. And Kitty, welcome to Why Did I Get Cancer? And I just would love to know, what was the motivation behind your podcast?
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. The podcast itself is called Stuff Your Doctor Should Know. And then my branding itself, the umbrella of what I do is called Healthy Gut Girl. The driver behind, I guess, Healthy Gut Girl really was just all about my health, just suffering my whole life from birth until, quite recently. And even now, I think just being a human, you always just have to have this awareness of the fact that you can fall ill and you're going to get imbalances no matter how healthy you get. And so, but what I learned was that it all really centralizes down to the gut. It really comes down to the gut. So I thought, what a great name for the whole branding. And then Stuff Your Doctor Should Know came from the things that really helped me were things that doctors had no idea about. I would go in and say, what do you think if I try this? Or what do you think about that? And they would say, don't, no, that's weird, no. Or they'd never heard of it. And so I thought, some doctors should know these things because they could be helpful. So that's where Stuff Your Doctor Should Know came from.
Yeah, such an amazing podcast. And yes, Stuff Your Doctor Should Know. They should. And for example, I just went and met my medication oncologist yesterday afternoon, and they're just pushing drugs. And I said, well, how much is this going to actually drop the chance that cancer is going to come back? It's a few percentage points. And I thought, okay, well, I've got a lot to think about. Do I really want to put myself through more trauma for a small percentage? And that doesn't work like that for every woman. But in my case, information is power.
Yeah, absolutely. And, drugs thank God we have drugs because they certainly saved my life as a child. And so, there's a time and a place for sure, but there's so much attention and focus we can put towards prevention and towards that doesn't have anything to do with medications. And that I just want to see a marriage of the two, just like really, instead of a war between the two, I want to see like a really nice marriage.
Yeah, I think I like that. A really nice marriage between the two because they each bring something to the table. And that brings me to my first question, and it's a bit of a loaded question, but do you have a theory on why people get cancer?
Wow. Yeah, that is definitely a great question. And I always say, I used to lecture a lot before pre-COVID, and I would always say, I would start some of the lectures by saying, if you die before the age of 85 from anything other than a tragic accident, it is related to poor digestion. People always, they think and then they go, well, wait a minute, I have high cholesterol runs in my family and breast cancer runs in my family. And so I don't believe that. But when you really start to break it down, when you think about what the whole purpose is of eating, consuming, absorbing, digestion, I say that every day, all day. And, when you think about what that is, so, just briefly, we eat something, the digestion process begins when we look at that food or that thing and we eat it, we chew it, we masticate it, we break it down a lot as much as possible. Hopefully, if you're a nice slow eater and you chew thoroughly, so important. It gets down into the stomach and it gets sterilized and disinfected in the stomach. And that acid bath gets broken down into like a soft serve. And then that soft serve goes into the small intestine. And then all these microbes and digestive enzymes start to really break it down and take out all the nutrition. And in that process right there, all these minerals, these nutrients are getting absorbed, and macronutrients, micronutrients. And all of that is ultimately energy for the body. And then what does that do? That keeps your cells healthy. That boosts your immunity. That keeps your brain working. And so much happens because of that process right there. And then it's not over yet. You have to eliminate the waste matter and absorb the water from that food in the bowel. If any of that is sluggish or slows down, that all begins in the gut. And I have this friend who's a mineral, it's all about the minerals, he tells me. He's the root cause protocol man, Morley Robbins. And he's like, it's all about minerals. It's all about minerals. And I say, well, how do you absorb the minerals? Okay, you're low in magnesium and you're, low in this and high in that. Well, how do you balance that if you're not digesting your food? So really, I think when it comes to cancer and other diseases, it's what's going on at the gut, what happened at the gut, and how can we remediate the gut? And even genetic predispositions, even if you're genetically predisposed to cancer, that has to be flipped on. That has to be triggered. Just because I'm gifted at my genes at playing the piano, that doesn't mean I'm going to be, a pianist. I have to trigger that lifestyle. I've got to trigger that talent, that skill. And so we do that with what? Digestion and lifestyle. So I think that's a huge component.
It's a huge component. And, looking at the typical American diet and the way people eat, so fast, literally inhaling their meals. You don't mix the food with saliva. And really, I'll tell my clients, chew almost to the consistency of like an applesauce. You really need to chew to start that process. Very few of us eat that way. We're in such a hurry. Yeah.
In such a hurry. And that hurry also has you in that sympathetic nervous system where that's that fight or flight. So already your digestion is impaired. It's put on the back burner because your mind is so worried and so consumed with all these other things you need doing. And so you're in fight or flight. And so you're not chewing. It's impaired for sure. And I think it starts even as a child, the state of mind you're in when you're consuming your food, what you're eating, how you're eating it, the quality of it, all that stuff matters so much.
Mm-hmm. So then that leads me to another question. We really have an epidemic of fear right now in our culture. How does fear or having really intense emotions, how does that impact digestion?
Just exactly. You nailed it a second ago with, we're so busy doing other things. And some of those other things are worrying. So being consumed with fear, fight or flight. And so now you're not in parasympathetic. And when you're in the parasympathetic, which is the rest and digest, there's all these functions, right? There's your breathing is calm, your mind, you're handling things with care. How many people can say that? I know that I have to actively pursue calming myself because otherwise if I'm not living in the future, I'm living in the past. And if I'm living in the present, I'm worried about the present. I mean, I think a lot of people have heard the analogy of the saber-toothed tiger and the whole concept of back, when humans were first on this planet and what fight or flight did for us. It kept us in this ability to act quickly, for our bodies to, use the part of our brain that helps us make quick decisions and move rapidly and run, right? And run from the saber-toothed tiger. And so same thing with us, we have that same part of our brain keeps us, looking at that ticker tape on the news that shows how many infections today. And there goes your immune system and your ability to digest. Right there, you're compromised your ability. So fear is all that. It's all worry and it gets you nowhere, right?
Yeah, it really robs you of health. It really does. I mean, what percentage of our immune system is actually in our gut?
Oh, wow. So it's debatable, but anywhere between 80 and 90% of it is governed by our gut. It's like the microbes in our gut. Not one metabolic decision happens in the body without, the help of our microbes. So yeah, it's a tremendous amount. It's shocking amount. That's why I say to everyone, if it's hormones, if it's cancer, if it's toe fungus, I don't know whatever it is, it will never hurt you to go back down to the basics and say, what am I eating? How am I digesting it? And not that's not it, but that's definitely like a fundamental place to start from.
Right. I mean, that's the foundation of this house that you're building is that, okay, slow down how quickly you're eating, maybe make some different choices in what you're eating. And, one of the things that I've been doing lately, especially post cancer, is really making sure that I'm in that parasympathetic when I'm eating. And what I mean by that is, I'm not watching the news while I'm eating. I'm not on my phone. If I just have I get a bad email or a tiff with my husband, I'm gonna do some things to try to calm down before I put food into my body. And I don't think most people probably do that.
Let me tell you how quickly you will come out of the sympathetic nervous system. And it's a proven fact, just box breathing for 3 minutes can take you right out of the fight or flight, just controlling your breath. And add to that you're enjoying yourself and even if you have to fake it till you make it first, just tell yourself this is fun, And you start to put the attention on anything worth doing is worth doing well. And that will start to shift your intention. And I think that matters. It really does. There's a lot of research that shows about the microbiome. People are in a state of fear and panic and upset and worry. What that does to the communication between all the microbes in your ears and your eyes and the microbes in your bowel and your rectum and your toenails, they all speak to each other in this chemical language. And they speak, and if there's disharmony or dis-ease, right? If there's disharmony, it's going to affect you entirely, your whole body. And your weak link, I always say that weak link will give. And for you, it's maybe cancer. For me, it's maybe, dementia as I'm aging, or maybe it's migraines. Like everyone is different, but that link will give.
Okay, so such amazing information. And I understand the broken link. What can we do to bring that link back together? And my follow-up to that is, it sounds like it could take a long time to fix.
The same way it took a long time to get in that state. The good news is I don't think it would take as much time. Like we have to think of our lifetime. When we finally are manifesting illness, a lot has gone on in our bodies. A lot of dis-ease, a lot of imbalance has gone on. A lot of dominoes have fallen. Dominoes we may not have ever even noticed. It won't take as much time as it took you to get in that state. When you have a plan and you take little tiny steps, instead of looking at Mount Everest as I got to get to the top, right? You look at this as a process. I'm going to start with my gut health and I'm going to commit to, taking digestive enzymes every single meal. That's my goal for this week. And all of a sudden you look back on 6 months and you're like, I took digestive enzymes every day for 6 months and I go to the bathroom twice a day instead of twice a week now. Or you start to see these things happening and it seems like a long time when you're going through it, but you look back and you're consistently pays off in spades. So I say, what do? You go back to basics. I don't care how far in your journey you may be. You may be doing Reiki and you may be doing energy healing and all kinds of amazing things. You will never not need to go back to basics when it comes to healing the body. And so gut health, gut health, gut health.
Gut health. And throughout my entire cancer treatment and before cancer, I was diagnosed with GERD and Barrett's esophagus. So clearly I have some issues of inflammation going on in my body. And I went from doctor to doctor, gastroenterologist, I've had endoscopies, I've had it all. And not one of them talked to me about gut health.
Wow. What a shame. I do have my GP. He's wonderful. And when I met him, he was like, you need to come and do classes at my office. So I was doing these classes once a month and speaking to his patients about, that PPI drugs and acid reducers, they're not meant to be on them for your life.
Right,
you have to, they're temporary drugs and the doctors don't tell you that. And they know that. And they're meant to be temporary to get relief so that you can find ways to fix the problem. And when it comes to GERD, there are many problems there that need to be addressed. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So again, your podcast, Stuff Your Doctor Should Know, and they don't. You have to be your own advocate, but that can also be challenging because many people just don't speak up. And it's amazing that some of the doctors just didn't have answers for me. Why would you do radiation on this type of cancer and not that type of cancer? And I didn't always get great answers. So it just goes to show you, if I don't want cancer to come back, I need to do some due diligence here.
Yeah. And I know that you know this and that you believe this as well, which is that I'm not here to demonize the medical profession at all. But they have they have a very compartmentalized way education and how they came to where they came to, and so it's very compartmentalized. My husband always says, if you go to a barber, you're going to get a haircut. If you go to a surgeon, you're going to have surgery. They're not going to be like, have you ever thought about, Ayurvedic medicine? They're going to say, like, this is what I do. I take gallbladders out for a living, and that's what I'm going to do for you if you're having gallbladder problem. And you don't, you've got this. Okay, well, I'm going to send you there then. And so we have to understand that. And, we have this wonderful, it's being demonized now, but, YouTube and alternative practitioners and all these people at our fingertips now to be able to go dive deep and find what resonates with you in terms of healing and prevention and just boosting immunity. And, we have so much at our fingertips now. And there's really no excuse now for us to not just take that that deep dive.
That is really true. And I just encourage anybody who's battling any type of disease, take somebody with you who is going to listen for you, which is hard during COVID. My husband was able to go to almost all of my appointments until the very end. I'm going to go back to something you mentioned at the beginning, the marriage of alternative health with traditional medicine. And it can be a really beautiful marriage.
Yes, I agree with that 100%.
Well, in this season of so much misinformation, how do people find out the truth about alternative medicine? Where do they go?
Well, I think that, I wish it wasn't called alternative medicine. I wish it was called traditional medicine because there's nothing alternative about, boosting your immunity and natural immunity and eating food that doesn't have toxins in it and eating homemade. This is traditional. This is like nourishing traditions, like the book Nourishing Traditions by the Weston Price concept of the old values. Like you said before, knowledge is power. So educating yourself on these things. And I think when you're calm and you're reading through this stuff, I really, I'm always praying about or saying a little meditation about, I want whatever information that is meant for me to see to resonate with me. I want to be able to resonate with the information that comes across me. There's so much out there. And I really believe this, that intrinsically, like in our bodies, we have, the microbes in us they're magical. And they know when something is right for them and when something is not right. And we could do a whole podcast, and I know you've heard me talk about this. It's truly magical. It's science-based. It's factual. These microbes want you to do things. The good guys and the bad guys, but the good microbes want you to seek out things that help them thrive. All of these things are senses that we have. And I really believe that can be cultivated. Ironically, the word cultivated comes from the word culture meaning like a diverse microbiome and all the cultures that are in there. It's like, it's a beautiful concept and philosophy. I think people could dive in there. And then things start to resonate. You look at something, that's not going to work for me. That sounds good for me. That sounds right. That sounds,
Yeah. And I actually do the same thing. You'd mentioned about how you read something and you pray about it. I always prayed about it and got to a place as best I could. And if I had a stronger immune system, perhaps I wouldn't have gotten the GERD, Barrett's esophagus, and then breast cancer, all within 18 months. These were all diagnosed. So, and you've probably answered this, but I'd like to just pose it again, and maybe you can give us your top 3 things. What can I do, or what can anybody do if they don't ever want to get cancer?
Well, I think getting really familiar with the digestion process. definitely. Top one thing is learning that process. You don't have to take an anatomy class or anything, but check out my books, find other gut health, gut centric people, and learn about that process and how can I support that process. It's called up-regulating healthy digestion. What can I do? What foods are good for that? What foods am I eating that are harming that? What toxins am I exposing myself to that impede healthy digestion? And just start to familiarize yourself with that. Learn about fermented foods, things that support healthy digestion. The second thing I would say is, beg, borrow, cheat, and steal, and find a way to manage your stress. Not get rid of it because it's impossible, but to manage your stress. And that for me is my faith. And also, I love Audible. I love to just take my dog for a walk and disappear into fantasy land. A lot of times it's research and books and things which can get me a little hyped up. So I really have a whole section of books that make me just disappear. And I like to do Audible because I can walk my dog and get fresh air and get exercise. But that might be something different for other people. I also think sauna is amazing, but that's not one of the top 3, but it is amazing. Truly, definitely one of the top 5 sweat therapies. The third one I would say is, I have this thing called the toxic bucket analogy. I think everyone has used this, and I've been using it for 10, 15 years easily. And it's just that we all have a bucket and it's filled with toxicity. The same size bucket you had when you were born is the same size bucket you have now. It just gets filled up, and everything toxic is in there, including stress and external toxicity like pollution, and then internal stuff and, bad food, and everything is in this bucket. And so mitigating what's in that bucket, look in that bucket and say, what's in this bucket? Okay, well, I should probably stop drinking, alcohol every night, or I should stop eating Jiffy peanut butter and upgrade to a raw almond butter and eat that 3 times a week instead of every day. And you start to look at what could potentially be toxic, and you start to try to chip away at it. Not just dump the bucket out, it's impossible, but you start to just reduce what's in that bucket. And that gives you a perspective on not taking on the whole thing at once. So that kind of, the second and the third one kind of go hand in hand a little bit, like managing your stress. I think that's important.
Yeah. And again, we've talked about this, really crazy, unprecedented season that we're in for the last year and a half. And stress is off the charts. And I don't see people managing stress any better than they were 18 months ago. So do you think we're going to see in the next year or two a lot of illness that possibly was germinated during this season?
I'm already seeing it in my practice. It's every day I get messages that are definitely, yes. I won't go into that completely, but it's definitely, I think it's and we don't, this is the time, I keep trying to refocus my mind into thinking things may never go back to normal. And maybe that's okay. Maybe this is this massive awakening to returning to self-care, returning to prevention, returning to the times when we are responsible for our own health. You don't just run out and get on a Z-Pack because you can't get rid of your stuffy nose. You don't run out and put on an antibiotic because you've had a urinary tract infection for 2 days. We don't jump, and we don't go to the doctor and just have them willy-nilly put us on antibiotics. When you say, wait a minute, do I have a virus or a bacterial infection? You took a culture, you didn't get the culture back, and you're already giving me an antibiotic. Can you explain why? It could be a virus, and here they are giving you an antibiotic, So just becoming more aware of of self-care and that taking responsibility of our health.
That is probably the most hopeful statement I've heard in the last 18 months, is that, yes, for those who are willing to take a deeper dive into their self-care and maybe think, okay, well, I don't have access to a doctor right now, so I'm going to do a little bit of research, and maybe having a little bit of fermented food might be really great for my gut. I heard Sally Fallon Morell, Weston A. Price Foundation, say that I think 2 tablespoons of a fermented food, let's just say kimchi or sauerkraut, is the equivalent of an entire bottle of probiotics. fascinating information. Again, I loved your statement about self-care, and it's a new season for all of us. Well, thank you, Kitty Martone. Oh my gosh, this was just such a pleasure to talk to you. And Kitty Martone, Healthy Gut Girl, her podcast, which I love, called Stuff Your Doctor Should Know. And you've got 6 years worth of podcasts that people can scroll through and get information about whatever seems to be ailing them and listen to it. I encourage you to listen to it before your next doctor visit.
Yes, I think that's a great idea. And send me questions. I love when people send me questions, and then I do podcasts about their questions and their ideas. And I have a gift for your audience. If they go to healthygutgirl.com/gift, and I have some goodies and places for them to start, and some free stuff and some discounted stuff and all sorts for them to check out and sign on to my newsletter and all kinds of stuff.
Thank you, Kitty. Again, such a pleasure. Thanks for coming on Why Did I Get Cancer?
Thank you.
One of my favorite supplement companies is Seeking Health. This company was created by Dr. Ben Lynch, author of Dirty Genes. I'm a huge fan, and one of the products that I love so much that he's created is this liquid vitamin D. My body has a hard time breaking down supplements, so I love the flexibility of having liquid vitamins. And I started this product a few weeks ago. I went to get my vitamin D tested, and it had gone up significantly. So I was thrilled with the results. And use the code for 10% off your order. Thank you for joining me today on the Why Did I Get Cancer podcast. I've got my shopping guide for all of my cancer self-care items in the show notes, along with information about today's guest and our show sponsors. And don't forget to subscribe to my podcast so you never miss an episode. Keep in mind, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a gal that got diagnosed with cancer and wanted answers. If you need medical advice, please be sure to consult with a medical professional. And thank you for listening.